you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up.
How's it going, guys? So in this tutorial, I basically want to take a look at an artist who I'm pretty sure the majority on the channel will probably know. And I think he's arguably one of the hottest producers in the game right now. And that is Joko slash Kolter, because he's recently changed his name, but most will know him by Joko. But I'll use the two interchangeably. And I essentially want to kind of like try to break down his sound. So the way I like to think of it, even though he's now got a different name, I basically like think of Joko as like his older style, like the house side of things, and then Kolter before he changed as like his breaks alias. So basically, anytime I refer to Kolter, I'll probably be talking about his breaks alias. But essentially, what I want to do is try and like break down his style, and thankfully there's actually quite a few tutorials on YouTube and in various places, which I'll maybe link below. But I've basically watched the majority of them because like I think he's one of the best producers in the game right now, and I feel like there's a lot to learn. So I think there's somewhere around like 5 hours of tutorials, roughly, just from him. And essentially, there's loads of gems in there, and essentially what this video is going to try and do is summarize, attempt to summarize all 5 hours. So I'll do what I normally do, where I'll go into detail on each of the instruments. I'll talk about some of like the overarching kind of themes of his music, like, and approaches he does, and generally just talk about like his style and his approach. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So I think the first place to begin with Joko slash Kolter is probably the vocals. So this is probably the hardest one to kind of pin down to him specifically, because he's got such a wide range of approaches, and I feel like when talking about vocals, or when talking about an artist and like trying to break down their style, vocals isn't really something you can kind of pin to them, because a lot of them use like similar techniques. However, I can certainly talk a bit about like his approach and what he sometimes does across various tracks, which I will. So the first one is kind of how you'd expect, is basically acapellas. So a lot of his like edits and remixes especially take this kind of approach, essentially where you take an acapella and use segments from that acapella, and very, very rarely does it include the full one, unless it's like an original. But because there's like such a wide range of acapellas available, like it's quite easy to like basically chop it up. So I've taken one example from one of his tracks. I think it was a remix. It was called Inside of Me, and it sampled a Whitney Houston song. So this is the vocal. It's not been warped amazingly, so forgive me on that.
I've been hearing your heartbeat inside of me. I keep your photograph beside my bed. Living in a world of fantasies. I can't get you out of my head.
So you might recognize snippets within that vocal. from that track, and that's essentially what he's done for that particular case, and what he does a lot in other tracks, which I'll talk about in a bit. So essentially you can take like a vocal and like basically like loop it for 8 bars, find like a nice segment in the track. You could basically move these markers and find something nice. And ideally what you want is like the shorter sections. So that's quite a long section, and you could actually just trim it down within this view here. But in this example, what I've actually just done is I've duplicated it and lined it up with another section. And that basically, if I just minimize these, that basically allows you to chop up like snippets from the vocal. So I refer to these as like vocal phrases.
I've been inside of me. I've been, I can't get you out of my head. I've been.
And this is like a very basic example of what you can do with acapellas, because you can go crazy on like the manipulation on this side, but in terms of like vocal type, it's quite a good starting point if you can basically find an acapella that works, and then you can essentially just get to work on chopping it up, find like phrases that work, and like ideally you want them to make sense, but they don't even have to make sense. Like this doesn't make sense.
I've been inside of me.
That as a lyric just doesn't make sense, but it just works.
I've been inside of me. I've been. I can't get you out of my head. I've been inside of me.
And you'll see, like, ideally you'd want to put that acapella in time, and it makes it easier to chop. But once you start bringing in the kick and the clap, it helps you to basically find that placement. So like, from a general point of view, not even specific to this artist, like using like acapellas, like original acapellas, and chopping them up, basically taking phrases is a good approach, regardless.
I've been inside of me. I've been. I can't get you out of my head. I've been inside of me.
And then I could like spend ages on manipulating it, but if you really wanted to, you could duplicate sections of audio, you could pitch it up and that kind of thing. So I won't spend too long on that one, but another example that of this kind of like vocal thing that he does is like doing the same thing is on a track he did like ages ago called Let You Go. So the track, the vocal he sampled was this.
When I had you to myself, I baby, give me one more chance.
Sorry that I love you.
Won't you please now?
I want you back.
Yes, I do now that I know wrong from right. Please let me.
That joyful jukebox.
So he basically sampled the Jackson 5, I Want You Back, and he basically just had like different like phrases, like I showed here, like no more than like 2 lines.
I've been
Like I've been,
inside of me.
just like little phrases that work really well, especially when like they're bouncing off other elements like the chords and stuff. So that's essentially like the acapella side. And then getting more creative, I think something that's quite nice, like, because acapellas, like, loads of people have access to these acapellas. I think the thing that like helps to put your own touch on tracks is sampling, and a nice vocal sample or a creative sample can kind of like get your track to stand out. And something I've noticed recently at least on one of his recent tracks, but I've noticed it actually like as kind of like a common theme in a lot of tracks I've heard recently. I don't know if there's like a trend going, but like using like phone based samples. Like I speak about sampling, but for some reason I keep hearing loads of like samples related to phone calls on both the vocal and the percussion side. So I've got this one here as an example. I've used like phone call, but it can be literally anything. And I'll show the vocal.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up.
And I'll lip it.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up.
So like, this can be literally anything, and I think it's quite common in like the minimal genre. Like on the tutorial I did last time, on the Sweely one, I basically sampled, I think it was like the Purge movie, where it's like, this is not a test. I basically sampled that, so feel free to steal that sample if you wish. But it's basically about like getting kind of creative with your sampling, and a lot of these kind of samples can kind of provide you with something that you don't really get with acapellas. Like with acapellas, you get mostly sung, or like if you're using like hip hop, you get like rap lines and stuff. But these ones kind of provide you with like interesting phrases in themselves. So using like a bit of both can be really good. But I noticed in one of his tracks he had like a kind of like a section where it's like a phone call, vocal, and an effects. And I think I noticed it in one of Rossi's as well. So there must just be like a phone house trend going on or something. I don't know, but
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up.
so you basically got like creative vocals, and something that can be quite cool to do, which I'll probably talk about a bit later, with regards to like drums and percussion, is basically have vocals that react to another element, or other elements that react to vocals. So in this case, I've got phone-based percussion.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up.
It's kind of like intelligent sampling is how I'd probably think of it. Like basically you've got like some examples that come to mind are like having a vocal talking about cutting the low end and doing a low cut in your mix. It's basically like creative ways of sampling. So in this case, I've basically got drums that relate to what's being said on the vocals. So I've got the phone, like the ringing, and like the putting the phone down type percussion, just because they work. Purely, I've added them because they work with that vocal.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up.
And then in this little section here, you could have like a, and like, because it's a phone call, you could have someone on the other end of the line, for example. I tried looking for a vocal that that would like pick up the phone. I'll basically keep it as broad as possible. I tried searching for a vocal where basically I could put something in that space, like pick up the phone or something. Like, I think I'm just gonna get phone vocal. Yeah, it's not like, I can't really find anything off the top of my head just now, and I don't really want to waste time doing it. But you can basically fill the gap.
The number you have dialed.
And I have this example here, a bit of profanity, which I think if you go and listen to the track of Joko's that I'm talking about with the phone call, I think it's actually like the same use of words.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please hang up. The number
So you can get like really creative with those kind of things. When it comes to like, you don't even have to think acapellas when it comes to vocals. You can literally like search anything, sample from movies. So that's kind of how I'd like differentiate the acapellas and this one is like creative sampling. I'd call them like creative vocals or something. And you can sample movies. You can like even use your own voices to like get those phrases that perhaps I couldn't find when I searched there. Like a phrase which is a bit better than that sample. I could do that myself. So like there's loads of potential there, and it just kind of shows you, and you can get even more creative by combining these vocals with other elements that work, like I kind of explained. So number 3 is kind of like vocal chops. So this is kind of going even further than the phrases and basically chopping the vocals into like slices. So like you could do that up here with the phrases, like by doing one word and kind of like duplicating it in audio. But I like to use MIDI as well, just because I feel like they both have equally valid approaches in terms of like how you can use the sounds. But I also like to use MIDI, so I've got this sample here, and I'll try and find the original quickly as well, like hip hop rap lines. I'll try and find this. I think it's this one.
1 to the 2 to the 2 to the 3. A special shout out to that man Joe B. 1 to the 2 to the 2 to the 3. A special shout out.
So if I'm just auditioning, like I could use that as a vocal, but a lot of the time these vocals don't really fit. I'll get rid of these.
One to the 2 to the 2 to the 3. A special shout out to that man Joe B. 1 to the 2 to the 2 to the 3. 1 to the 2 to the 2 to the 3. Can I get over? Can I get over?
So that could be a
Can I
phrase.
get over? Keep walking. Keep walking. Keep walking.
So a lot of these, like I said, these could be used for phrases. And the place is Breakbeat Paradise for anyone wondering. I think it's one he shows quite a lot in these tutorials, and it's quite good for that. It basically has like a lot of different sounds, including vocals like these, and they're all free as well, so I definitely recommend checking that out. But if I wanted to take a phrase, like I could quite easily take the acapella up here and do this, but what I would do instead is I'd find a slightly shorter phrase, because an acapella's a bit too long for this. I go to this, and then I basically slice to a new MIDI track, and I keep these as is. You can play around with different ones, but not in this case. And then you basically get, I'll move it up, you basically get something like this, where it's basically chopped the phrase into slices.
1 to the 2 to the 2 to the 3. A special shout out to that man Joe B.
So you basically get all the different samples, which can be sliced, which works really well. You can use it as like vocal textures, or you can use it as like vocal fills. There's lots of like potential here with different ones. But basically what I would do, normally what I would do is delete all the sizes and just, which I believe I did here. I've basically got 2 layers here, and this is kind of like what I'd probably do when it comes to like vocal chops. obviously there's like loads of different approaches, but what I've done is, in this case, I've kept the original here.
Shout out to that man Joe B. Shout out to that man Joe B. Shout out to that man Joe.
So you've got like a really choppy phrase, and then I've kind of done my own pattern down here, because the way it chops sometimes is sometimes it doesn't chop. It depends how you set it, but sometimes it doesn't chop. Sometimes it will chop like hits like that, and then other times, if I find this one is 18. I'll go to 18. See, like, it's on loop. This algorithm, depending on how long the note plays, you can have like shorter ones like that. But this algorithm has loads of different settings, like loop mode, which works really nicely because I can basically just hold it. And like you can hear there, that can be used as like a kind of like transition between sessions. So I've got that section here which is like looped, but I could essentially have like a fill here or something. And like that 18 slice. So you'll see like there's like potential basically to manipulate it and automate it, or even have like a different section here or like a fill. So it's kind of like I can't speak. It's kind of why I like using this mode. And then you've obviously got the potential here. You've got like glitchy vocals. Decay doesn't really do much. Attack. You can do all sorts to the ADSR, but this makes it like glitchy. It's kind of like the equivalent of when you go into a sample and do this thing and like bring that down. It's basically the same as that. If you've never done that, give that a try because it works wonders on like drums and stuff. So I basically got that, and I can keep manipulating it, like the sustain. But because it's in loop mode, you've basically got like loads of potential with like how you manipulate these chops as well. I've shown the sustain, and then the start time. The start will be pretty much here, depending on, because it'll slice, and you can go in and manually change these. So you'll see, like, basically the more you manipulate it, the more it doesn't sound like a vocal anymore, and the more it kind of like goes to like a extra glitchy effects type thing. But I definitely feel like you hear a lot of those kind of vocals in Joko's music, and I definitely think it's like an interesting way to kind of keep the track interesting. I know I've just said interesting twice. running out of ways to describe it. You'll see like these are basically affecting how much of the sample is looped, which is basically like the more you squash it, you basically get into like granular synthesis territory. So if I had to recommend a few parameters, I'd basically recommend the sustain. To make it like glitchy, and then to like create these like effects. This one, lip compress. I think this is just the fade. So basically these three, and maybe like you can move the start offset, and then you can go in, because it's obviously chopped based on the algorithm, you can basically go in and move transients and stuff around. So like there's like loads of potential. And basically what I've done is I've used that line as a texture and that line as like a phrase, kind of like similar to the above. So if you want to take a vocal and manipulate it, I would definitely recommend chopping it to MIDI. Just because it's, as you can see, there's like, just from these parameters, it's so easy to manipulate it into something completely different. And it's kind of like, you get these slices here, but you can like move them up, you can change the pitch, you can completely change the phrase here. And then the more I go away from that original lineup that the algorithm drew in, the more I head towards like this kind of like texture line. So that's definitely a nice one to do. And in terms of the source, you can pretty much do anything. Like hip hop works really well, but like he has loads of different influences. So in terms of his approach, like the options are open really. That's that one. And then finally, this is probably more common in his Kolter alias, at least before he changed, and all his music's under the one alias. But something that was quite common in his like breakbeat style was like these like vocoded vocals. So basically what these do is they basically take phrases kind of similar to number 2, or number 1 here, like with the phrases, and they basically take like words, it's not even like full phrases, it's like words. And I'm trying to think where I got these. I think it was in like a Music Radar pack. They're basically Music Radar do a lot of free samples, and in amongst them there's like these vocal speaking phrases. Like you can get these types of samples anywhere, but this is a specific area we got them in.
Create, drums, energy, drums.
So I've basically got these like textured vocals, which already sound like they've been run through processing like vocoder anyway. But you could actually like use your own voice, like I was saying with the phrases. And if you don't want to like hear your own voice, which I feel like quite a common reason not to use it, the vocoder can completely manipulate it anyways. So this example is a good place where you might want to consider using your own phrases. And it can be as simple as you want. You can essentially take a vocal like this,
Create, drums, create, music, create, drums, create, energy.
So you basically got these vocals. It doesn't matter that they already sound like they've been vocoded. They can be as plain as you like. But you've basically got these kind of like vocals that are saying something related to music. It doesn't have to be about music. But these one-word vocals, which from memory, I also seem to hear a lot in Wheelie's music. Like I hear a lot of these types of vocals in his music. He's pretty good at sampling when it comes to like vocals and sampling in general. So that's a reference I would recommend checking out if you maybe want to get an idea of these kind of vocals. And essentially take these, and there's not much with regards to processing with any of them, and it doesn't really matter. Like I haven't really touched on like delays and reverbs because it is literally just delays and reverbs, and anyone can figure that out. But with regards to like the technique, it's basically like using vocoders. So I've got this dry setting here,
Create, drums, create, music,
and then I've got this wet chain. And basically how I've set that up, you might be aware already, but I'll just go over it anyway. You go external, and then you set up a channel called a carrier, and you can basically load any sample or plugin to be that kind of signal that affects the vocal. So I've got two examples here. I've got a pad sample, which I've muted. So I've basically just got that sample, and I'm basically just playing a C, and I'm repeating every 2 bars, but I could in theory just extend it out, but that's just the way I've drawn the MIDI. And what I've done is I've gone external, found my carrier, which was that pad layer, and done post effects. There's not many effects on it anyway, so it doesn't matter in this example, but you can do it before the effects. It basically, the effect, like you're basically running you're basically using that signal to affect the vocal. So everything you do on this chain does matter, and like the sound source in particular matters. So that's analog. So just to show you. So you'll see everything I do to affect the source impacts on the vocal. So you can get like really creative with. and then it's just playing a single note. So what I've done here is I can like add a chord. That note just sounds wrong. Hang on. So you can affect the sound, the characteristics of the vocal, like the vocoded vocal, using the actual instrument. The notes make a difference. You can have like a single note. So in this example, or you can have a chord. It depends how you want it. Both approaches work. But for this example, I'll go back to the pad, which is a chord already. And I've not played around with it too much, and then so you'll see like it works really well. So I've basically got this chord, and then you can get like really creative. Like I've just got like normal, basically just got C for everything with like a little bit of transposition. But I could, within this chord, I could start going like, I can basically move it up within the phrase. Which doesn't really work too well in this example, but it can be quite a cool thing to do, is basically to have different notes playing throughout the sample. So like you could have like a chord moving up. It might work better on the plugin. Yeah, it works better on this plugin. It's because I'm using a sample. Which works really well because you kind of like when you're speaking, you probably aren't speaking like in the same pitch every time. So it can kind of maybe like simulate like a more natural voice, because you can like use like fluctuations in pitch depending on like how someone's speaking. So it's kind of like that. It kind of emulates that when you like do these changes. What I'll do actually, I'll bring this down. That's like the Whitney Houston vocal. Yeah, this will work well. Like this isn't already vocode. pretty cool. So yeah, it basically just shows you like the potential of the vocoder and using it on vocals, and there's loads of things you can like consider in the process, but essentially what you want to do is set up a vocoder that has some kind of carrier, and then with regards to its sound, you can either program in single notes or chords, and you can use pretty much any sound source and manipulate it to a way where you like how the vocal's being changed. So that is essentially that, and then finally we have the like textures, these textures which are also being used for the vocoder, and it basically sounds, so it's kind of like these textures that are similar to what I did here. And I think it helped that I used vocals that already have like a kind of harsh texture to them, but it doesn't really matter too much. So essentially what I've done is I've taken the kind of like create vocal, I've chopped it up, and I'll loop the whole thing. So I've basically sliced this kind of vocal and used the same vocoder trick. Which sounds a lot better. And then, so that's just another example. You can literally like chop it up, create these textures, and then you can use the vocoder to really bring it out. So yeah, that's essentially like an overview of some of like the techniques that I believe Joko uses, and like some of them are quite standard, but other ones are like a bit more creative, and yeah, it basically like gives you an overview of like where he looks, or where he might look for vocals, some like the main vocal types he might use, and different creative techniques you can use to kind of like manipulate them and make them more your own. So that is pretty much it on the vocal front. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this one. I hope you kind of found it useful, like trying to analyze Joko's entire process. Obviously with this one we looked at the vocals and various techniques he might use and other producers might use. It's not, some of these techniques aren't even limited to him, but considering he's the artist we're looking at, most of these are all relevant. In the next one we're gonna be looking at the drums, and then hopefully we'll be moving on to some of the synth elements as well. So yeah, if you liked it, be sure to give that video a like. Let us know your thoughts, any future videos you want to see, and be sure to subscribe, as we are now approaching, or we are now on a journey to reaching a new milestone, because we just recently hit 1K. So thank you to everyone for that. And as always, if you want to check out any resources or other videos, then I'll link a few suggestions below, and feel free to have a look on your own anyway. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one.